Good day, CCF family, and welcome to Sunday Fast Track, where you ask real-life questions and we give you biblical truths. I'm Zen Pasagad, a volunteer from the communications team, and we're here today with Pastor Edric Mendoza to answer some of your questions. Good day, Pastor Edric, and thank you for your message. How are you?
Good. Hey, I think it's the first time I meet you.
Yeah.
Are you new to the team?
Relatively newer.
Great. I'm excited to do this with you and just kind of share from our hearts and from the truths of God, these questions that you have. I'm excited but nervous. Let's go.
I am excited too. All right, let's go to our first question. We usually see standards and high expectations as good things, especially when we have them for ourselves. But when do standards and expectations start to become a bad thing?
If you heard the first point earlier that Paul was reminding us of, right? He talks about gains. So that has to do with the standards, even maybe accomplishments that come with it. When that in and of itself becomes where you draw your identity, and your sense of security and your time and energy, then you're saying it's become a bad thing. Because then it's like, this is my love for Jesus. This is my love for these things. It's all taking its place up here. You want to try and counter that and go back and say, Lord, this is distracting me. I need to be able to pare back and realize that all of these things are loss compared to you.
I love that. As a competitive girly, I relate to that.
Competitive girly. All right.
All right, question number 2. We know that good things can become stumbling blocks when it comes to loving God fully. If people find out that their love for the ministry exceeds their love for Christ, should they step down from the ministry? What is your advice?
So I think the first question is why, right? Why is it that they feel like their love for the ministry exceeds their love for Christ? Because conceptually, it doesn't kind of make sense because the ministry is for Christ, right? So is it because in the same way, they're getting their sense of self-worth from the accomplishments or the gains in the ministry? And in that sense, same answer as the first, right? You want to ask yourself, why is this happening? How can I then shift it so that my love for Christ goes before the things I'm doing? I wouldn't suggest to step down necessarily. I would just ask that. Now, for some people, it might be that you're just so consumed and you're so preoccupied that it might be healthy to take a step back to remind yourself that the ministry for God will carry on with or without you. Does that make sense? That's good for our souls because it's His work. It's not ours. So depends on the answer to why. Then you can decide step back or just reframe. That'll help.
Right. So always do your heart check. Yeah. All right. For our last question, some people have stronger attachments towards acquiring material things versus their attachment to Christ. How can they let go of materialism and shift their love to Jesus?
Wow, this is a question that everyone has struggled with from time immemorial. Why? Jesus says you cannot love both God and mammon, right? Or these material things. And it's very real. We need money and things to literally carry on. Right now, we have a mic. We have to wear clothes, right? You gotta have lighting. So the question is not so much, should we remove all of the responsibilities in trying to acquire these things that allow us to do what we need to do? The question is, when you look at the time and energy on a practical note, are these spent more on the pursuit of these things rather than the pursuit of Christ? And more fundamentally, do these things allow you to do what you need to do for Christ? Or are you now reversing it and saying, I'm going to pursue all these things. Oh, and I'm going to do the Christian-y stuff. Then there's something fundamentally wrong. So similar to what you coined earlier, the heart check, right? I think it's very important for us to ask that question. Is there something wrong in my heart in the priority or the focus of what I'm doing and pursuing right now? And if you want to shift it to Jesus versus over the material things, I go back to some very fundamental spiritual disciplines, right? You said you're a competitive person. So I assume you have some regimens you do to make sure that physically we keep our body strong, the disciplines, right? So I go back to that. If you want to shift your love for Jesus versus any other thing, do what you know you need to do that will strengthen that relationship, such as time in the Word, time listening and praying. Once a week saying, Lord, this is your day. I'm gonna worship you. And then other disciplines like fasting and being able to be held accountable in discipleship groups. Be faithful in those areas. And as you do the motions of all those things, even if the feelings aren't there, you'll see the feelings begin to follow because that's how you build and strengthen relationships.
Very practical pieces of advice. Thank you so much for answering all of our questions, Pastor Edric. But wait, before we go, we have a special podcast prepared for all of you this love month entitled Love, Expectation versus Reality. We have these wonderful speakers to answer some of your most asked questions about love, dating, marriage, and more. Tune in now to CCF On Air to watch and learn about love. And that's it for CCF Sunday Fast Track. God bless.